tell me your involvement relating to the rape and murder of Emma Caldwell.
No problem.
Ian, can you describe your relationship to me with Emma Caldwell? Could you provide a description of Emma to me? Can you confirm where and when you first met? Who introduced you? Can you confirm what age Emma was when you first met? And what age were you? Can you provide me, Ian, with details of all sexual contact that you had with Emma Caldwell? You, Ian Gordon Packer, having met Emma Caldwell, now deceased, and persuading her to enter motor vehicle registration number Sierra November 05 Echo Kilo Golf, that's SN05EKG, did drive her to an area of woodland known as Lengfield Woods near to Howgate Road, Roberton, South Lanarkshire, and did thereafter assault Emma Caldwell, force her to remove her clothing and underwear, restrain her, seize her wrists, seize her neck, place a cable around her neck, and tighten same, restrict her breathing, and strangle her, and by means to the prosecutor unknown, otherwise inflict violence on her, and all this you did with intent to rape her, and you did murder her. Do you understand that charge? Would you like to make any response to the charge?
Glasgow, Scotland. In 2005, it was known as the murder capital of Europe, with there being a whopping 83 homicides the previous year in 2004, largely down to the gang's so-called booze and blades culture.
I'm standing on the Green Bridge in the area where I grew up. Now, this bridge has traditionally been a place where gangs would meet to fight. We're going to see if we can track down some gangs tonight. So what do you fight for?
What else are we going to do? Rape and possession.
To make sure that there are no shite bags.
Fight for a joint.
So that's the way it's going to be, man. Otherwise, we have to cunt's life. Because you've been through my dad, you know that's life. So it just follows on from then.
Based off a scary statement like this, it would be a fair assumption to make the streets of Glasgow in 2005 were not a safe place to be out on. Who would want to be out and about in the murder capital of Europe, which beat out far larger cities like London, Paris and Berlin to the not so prestigious title? Unfortunately, however, some people had to be out and about in these crazy, scary streets, and out and about at the worst, most unsafe time and in the most unsafe place within the city. The Drag is a grid of streets in Glasgow located in the business district of the city centre that runs between Central Station and the motorway. The Drag is another name for the red light district. The Drag, as it's called, is lined by those in the prostitution industry. The dark, dingy streets are lit up by dim yellow streetlights and the headlights of cars of prospective clients. Workers on the Drag are all too aware of the dangers that come with getting in one of these lurking cars that prowl throughout the night. Sometimes they see there's no other way than to get in this car and take a gamble to make some money, and sometimes they end up paying the ultimate price for doing so. Some live to tell the tale. The worst time was when a punter punched me unconscious in the front seat of his car and knocked my teeth out, says Carly, a woman who worked in the Drag in and around 2005. I woke up in the boot of his car. We were out in the middle of nowhere in the countryside and he dragged me out of his car. He punched and kicked me senseless. Then he raped me. Carly was raped repeatedly and brutally assaulted over a number of hours. Quote, I was sure he was going to kill me. I thought I'd been got by a serial killer. You see things like this on TV. I really believed that I was going to die, that he wasn't going to let me go because of all the things he'd done to me. After terrorising her with a knife, the man dumped her on the outskirts of the city, leaving her to make her own way home, bloodied and battered. He had absolutely brutalised her, all for the small fee of £30. In total, from 1991 to 2005, 8 prostitutes in total were brutally murdered and countless others, like Carly, brutally beaten, raped and left to die. The Drag was somewhere that you really didn't want to be. The risk was extraordinary. Those who hurt and killed workers on the drag were empowered to do so by, quote, a toxic culture of misogyny and corruption. That meant that, quote, instead of receiving justice and compassion, they were humiliated, dismissed, and in some instances, arrested. The murder capital of Europe, dark dingy streets in the middle of the night, surrounded by abusive, potentially deadly clients, in a place where the law turns a blind eye and society is not governed. Can you possibly think of a more unsettling, dangerous place to be in? Emma Caldwell, with her curly blonde hair and blue eyes, was instantly recognisable. She was 27 in 2005 and had been living at Inglesfield Hostel in Govan Hill, which housed homeless women within the city. Growing up, she was a normal girl who had horses. She was the youngest of 3 siblings, which included herself, Karen and Jamie. They lived in a happy home in the village of Cardross in Argyll. Her eldest sister, Karen, became very, very ill. She ultimately died when she was 31, and her sister, Emma, she was just aged 20. This affected her badly, plunging her into a deep sense of grief. She would enter a relationship with a man who introduced her to drugs, which eventually led to her trying heroin, which her mother believes was to deal with the loss of her sister, which she was taking extremely badly. She wasn't built like us. She wasn't streetwise or hardened like us. She was timid, polite and well spoken. Emma had been living in the hostel in Govan Hill after she became addicted to heroin. In an effort to fund her expensive heroin habit, she would turn to prostitution, which in turn would see her end up working on the notorious drag in Glasgow city centre. Ian Packer. He was someone who frequently visited the drag and he had a reputation going for him. He started having sex with prostitutes as soon as he turned 18 years old. He liked to mistreat those who worked along the drag, severely mistreat them, in fact, dating all the way back to 1999. Leading up to 2005, there were multiple concerns raised about his dangerous, worrying behaviour to the police. One victim of Packer's abuse was arrested when she reported an incident to the police. They told me I wasn't supposed to be in the city centre. I told them about the attack and I got jailed for a section 46 offence, which is prostitution. Nothing ever came of it. They never took a statement. They never checked CCTV. They were not interested. Ian Packer's name was put in a beware book, an intervention team for street sex workers called Base 75 on several occasions. He was known to prey on girls that were blonde, small, skinny and on drugs. Girls that were really, really vulnerable. All characteristics that Emma Caldwell would fall under. Inevitably, Packer would cross paths with Emma, the earliest time known being in 2004, which he indecently assaulted her in the city's Barrowlands area. He became infatuated with the 27-year-old, driving around the rough dark streets of the drag, looking through the streets for her, even going to the length of scaring off other potential clients. He was completely obsessed with her. Margaret Caldwell, Emma's mother, would drop her youngest daughter off at the hostel she was staying at on Sunday the 3rd of April 2005. She waved her goodbye and Emma would say, "Bye mum, I'll phone you on Monday or Tuesday." She never did phone her mother. Her mother would try call her multiple times, all to no avail. Later on in that week, she would be reported missing on the 10th of April. This photo is the last known image of Emma. She would last be seen between 12:30am and 1:30am on the 5th of April 2005 on London Road, Glasgow. Almost a month later, on the 8th of May 2005, her body would be found. Neil Borland was out walking his dog on the 8th of May in the dense, green Lingfield woods. He was walking his dog like normal, when suddenly, out of the blue, his dog roamed off away out into the trees. I could see my dog and she could see me, but she would not move. He would go to see what his dog would not move away from, and discover Emma's lifeless body, face down, naked, lying between two lines of trees with a garrote around her neck. She had been sexually assaulted before being strangled to death out in the woods. The search for Emma's killer was a big one. Her face was broadcast onto the side of a derelict block of flats in Glasgow to raise awareness for the case. There was also a reconstruction of the events that the police believed to have happened on an episode of Crime Watch, which for those unfamiliar with the UK is a show detailing recent notable crimes across the UK. The police, of course, they had suspects, one in particular being Parker. Parker, he was interviewed a total of 6 times following Emma's murder, with his version of events changing almost every single time. At one point, he even led police directly to the woods where Emma's body was found. Talk about brazen. This surely would make you think, what more do they need to catch this guy? This combined with all the other statements from victims of Parker's would have surely been enough to send him away to jail for life. If only the police had listened to all these statements, then this could have all been stopped. Senior officers in the case told detectives in the case not to pursue Parker as a suspect. Instead, they were told to focus their efforts on 4 Turkish men. There was a 76-second phone call from a Turkish man to Emma, the last one she would ever receive at 11:20 PM on the 4th of April 2005. Correct, that was just a couple of hours before she was last ever seen. So the police, they went to check out this guy, only to realise that he had left the country to travel to Turkey right around the time Emma disappeared. Talk about suspicious. Eventually, he returned from Turkey where he'd gone to get married and he voluntarily agreed to be interviewed. He said he didn't know Emma and provided some DNA samples for analysis. Soon after Onku, the Turkish man, was interviewed, a prostitute came forward and said she was raped in a Turkish cafe in Bridge Street, as well as another 2 who had been assaulted as well. Interestingly enough, the last electronic signal from Emma's phone actually came from the area around the same Turkish cafe. 4 Turkish men would eventually be arrested in relation to this case. The police, they would bug the Turkish cafe and they recorded some definitely interesting, astonishing conversation. They killed the girl. They brought her here. Halil did it. They killed her like an animal. They lifted her with the rug cover. Who doesn't have a cable? Did you take it? Blood of Emma's was also found at the scene of the crime. Then, as quickly as it opened, it collapsed. The translations of the apparently incriminating tapes were first questioned by lawyer Matthew Berlow. He said his experts believed that the police translations bear no resemblance to what had been said. Innocent conversations had become garbled into something sinister. The police had been focusing their time and energy in the wrong place the whole time. This focus on the wrong group would cost them the tune of £4 million. Meanwhile, Ian Parker was a walking free man and the case would end up going cold. This was up until 2015, when the case was launched again as a reinvestigation. Years and years after the Turkish leads ran completely cold, the police, they would decide to focus more on Plan B this time, Parker. And this, it would only come around after the Sunday Mail ran this headline in the newspaper, shining the case in the public spotlight again and leading to the reinvestigation, which they undoubtedly should have done years sooner. If one lead runs cold, then why would you just stop, especially when the other lead is as serious and hot as this one? Come 2015, there was far more evidence that could tie Ian Parker to the murder, and witnesses were finally taken seriously. 19 whole years after her brutal murder. Parker, now in the limelight and now prime suspect in the murder, is full of confidence. He feels invincible. He's not been caught yet and never will be. He is giddy with power. He crazily contacts the BBC saying that he wants to clear his name and he wants to do an interview. This is when this happens.
I said I would get back to you once I'd finished my investigation and present the evidence that I found to you.
Yep.
I don't believe you've been telling me the truth.
What do you mean you don't believe I'm telling you the truth?
Well, all the evidence that I've seen and heard indicates that you are a sexually violent man who has been sexually violent to a number of women throughout the years?
No.
I've learned of an allegation that Emma was raped shortly before she went missing. The attack took place behind billboards not far from where we're sitting today. A man raped her that night, and that man was you.
No, it wasn't.
You didn't rape Emma that night?
No, I did not.
Do you remember a woman called Magdalene?
Yes.
I've interviewed her for this programme. She has told me of the months of sexual harassment, abuse and assault by you
Really?
against her,
Really?
which culminated in you raping her.
I never raped her.
She used to wake up at night to find you sitting on her bed.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
She's lying.
I never touched her.
You told me you'd never been to the place where Emma's body was found.
Absolutely.
You've been there many times, according to all the evidence that I've seen, where you would force them to strip.
No, not at all.
They would be terrified.
Not at all.
The first woman you took to those woods was Emma.
No, it wasn't.
You took her 6 times.
No, never.
You told the police that.
Because they wouldn't let me go. They were adamant it was me that done it, and I says it wasn't me. Why would I contact you to do a programme if I'd done this? It doesn't make sense. Why would I put myself out there and say I didn't do it? What, to try and hide behind it, really?
All the evidence that I've seen and everything that I have learned makes it clear that you are a sexually violent man.
Not a sexually violent
who has
man whatsoever.
raped women.
I've never raped any in my life.
And all the evidence that I've seen means that I think you've got a few hard questions to answer about the death of Emma Caldwell.
Not at all. I know nothing about it.
Did you kill Emma?
No, I never. I could look you in the eye and say no, I had nothing to do with it whatsoever. I'm not a violent person.
I've got no more questions for you.
After months of investigating him, I knew that he was an incredibly sexually violent man, Polling said. I started to find out that Ian Parker had been taking women down to remote woods where he would force them to strip, where he would sexually assault them, where he would terrify them, and just meters away from where this was taking place is where Emma's body was found and she was naked and strangled. You can see his whole face and demeanour just change right there and then. 2 days after the BBC's programme airs, Parker is charged with attacking a former partner, and in February 2020 he is jailed after pleading guilty. In 2021, soil in the footwell of his van is found to be a 97% match for the soil found in the exact same spot Emma was found. In February 2022, Parker is arrested on suspicion of her murder. By December, additional charges have been brought. How often did this motherfucker clean his van? I mean, this murder happened 19 years ago and they were able to find soil in his van a whole 19 years later. He needs to clean that more often. In court, it was heard that Parker pursued a campaign of violence and appalling sexual mistreatment of a very large number of women. He had a Jekyll and Hyde temper, meaning and he saw the mistreatment of them as consent-free business transactions. He would throttle his victims when they did not comply with his demands. The limelight was also shone in the failings of the police, with the reports not being taken seriously with quite literally a pinch of salt, and those who complained even being arrested and charged themselves. From 2003, the police were being warned about him. If the police had just listened to us girls who came forward, then a lot of the other sexual crimes wouldn't have happened, and Emma could still be alive. They have blood on their hands. The police were corrupt back then. They looked down on us. They didn't care. They thought we were putting ourselves in that situation, and whatever happened to us was our own fault. This was all read out in court. More than 20 other women were attacked after Emma was killed and after Parker was first on the police's radar. That's a serious failing there. Ian Parker was eventually sentenced to 36 years in prison for the murder of Emma Caldwell and all the other horrible acts he committed to over 20 other women. From my perspective, from the outside looking in, this is a serious failure at the hands of the police. How can you let a case go completely cold when the evidence is piled sky high against this man? The evidence on the Turkish men seemed minimal, and when it was proven it wasn't actually them, the police decided just to leave it, which in turn could have stopped so much more hurt and crimes.